So we've got a lot of things to cover with this election upon us. And we were just talking about the fact that we've been waiting for election day, and we still don't have the results just yet, but we're very close, very close. And so hopefully before too very long, we will know who the president will be. We pretty much know, I believe we know, but we want to get the final word, the official word. Don't you agree, ladies?
That's absolutely right.
And mathematically, anything can happen at this point.
Oh,
that's
please
right.
Don't say that. but I know you're right. I know you all are right. Let's get started with the Mississippi race, the Senate race. What's you all's take on the Senate race with Mike Espy and Cindy Hyde-Smith? Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith.
It's disappointing for sure that Mike Espy didn't win. He definitely ran a really tight campaign. I think even tighter in some areas than his 2018 race. But I think there's a different type of momentum that was there in 2018 that I don't think was there this year. Especially because of the comments that Cindy Hyde-Smith made last time. You saw an abundance of us go out to the polls just for the sheer fact, or in spite of, or because of the comments that she made in support of Mike Espy. I think this time we really wanted to make sure that he won, but it just wasn't the same momentum that was there in 2008. It could have been because of the pandemic. It could have been for a couple of different things, but he still ran a good race. It's just disappointing that he didn't win.
It was a very well ran campaign. I was somewhat for time to campaign this time around. More ads were placed. He was able to canvass the state, and he did better 2 years ago than he did this time. Mississippi is approximately right under 40% African American. So if you look at it just from the windshield inspection, you'll almost say that the results kind of fell along racial lines, which was disappointing. Because that meant that a lot of white liberals did not cross over to vote for him, or some African Americans did not. We don't know that level of scrutiny yet, and hopefully we can have him on. But it is something to say that when you look at what's happening in Georgia, in the ground campaign, that Stacey Abrams has been able to get people excited, registered to vote, and go to the polls and vote. That Georgia may be a swing state. Yes. I just hope that we get to that point in Mississippi, because when you talk to folks, it's a different air. It's a different feeling. We saw the state flag come in, and I understand what Deanna's saying. It's all about momentum, and for whatever reason, it did not translate this time, and I was quite surprised by the margins.
I think we have kind of a different scenario. Of course, the last time that Mike Espy ran against Cindy Hyde-Smith, it was an open seat for one. It was an open seat, and Donald Trump was not on the ballot. And I think that was huge. So, I thought in terms of, certainly Mike Espy, it was difficult enough to run against a sitting senator. But it's also difficult to run against Donald Trump. And I think that was the added hurdle for him to get over, and for us to get over as people who want to see Mississippi progress more and to have more diversity within our representation.
That's right.
So that's a tall order. And you notice in terms of her campaign, She didn't do a whole lot and she realized she really didn't have to do a whole lot because the Donald Trump people were going to come out and support her.
Absolutely.
So, I often say that Mississippi is really a state of contradictions. We can't seem to get over certain hurdles, certain impediments. This whole identity crisis that we have, or phenomenon, I don't know what to call it. And it just seems that this country is just getting more and more divided in terms of race. So I certainly commend Mike Espy for what he did and his team dealing with all of this, because you're dealing with the pandemic, you're dealing with, all the things that are being kind of thrown out there. And still he was able to, I think he got 42% of the vote. Which was,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, but what was it for him last time? What percentage did he get?
He got about between 44 and 46 last time.
That's what I was thinking.
Of the exact, but I know it was lower. I think it was 4 points lower this time.
That's definitely significant for us. And we've just got to do, as you all mentioned, Stacey Abrams she's just a force to be reckoned with. And she has just taken Georgia. Man, if they flip Georgia, my goodness. Of course, we know the election will be over, but what an accomplishment. And so we just know we have work to do.
That's
we definitely
right.
have a lot of work to do. But there are some, in Hinds County specifically, when I was looking at those numbers, although the total count in the state is not finished, I think there's only about 81% for the Senate race that are reported right now or accounted for. And in Hinds County specifically, even though that count itself is also still not the final count, there were about 82,000 ballots that they have, and only Biden got 59,000 votes around that plus. And actually, surprisingly, Mike Espy got 61,000 of the votes in Hinds County.
That's
so
more
people voted for Mike Espy in Hinds County than they did for Joe Biden.
Yes.
So that's very interesting. And the support was here. It's just getting some of those Republican counties in other parts of the state was probably a difficult task.
Yes. It's, somebody mentioned, basically, I don't know what else we have to do in order to push out the vote even more. But I was so very proud to stand in line and see all of the people standing in line to vote. It really, the message got out, and we, of course, about 60% of the registered voters of Hinds County voted.
Which is outstanding, which is almost double than the average election.
That's right. Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing. I was so proud. My heart just filled, with joy of seeing so many people out on election day. And I know there were lines and lines during absentee voting as well. But just to see that people got up early in the morning, because I got to the polls around 6:55, and the line was wrapped around the building, all the way around the building, with people, in what we would consider cold weather. And they stood in line for 2 hours or more to make sure that their voices were heard. And I just, I really just wept at the power that we had, that really the voice of Black Mississippians was heard for sure on this Tuesday.
Well, that's what, I always tear up. I'm a crier. And so I had the opportunity to vote early in absenteeism because I was out of town election day, and the process was flawless. I have to give it to Hinds County and Zach Wallace how it was ran. I waited maybe about an hour and a half, but it was a very professional and seamless process. but the line was it never died down. When I was standing in line, it just continued to grow. When I walked out, it was still a long line, and that was every day. And so they said we doubled the number of people who voted early, which speaks to the state of Mississippi. Mississippi should consider the way we vote and how we register. Clearly, people are calling out, if we don't have a national holiday for Election Day, that we do need other options beyond one day and a time slot to vote.
Absolutely.
And I think for me, I told someone, no matter where you fall on this election, this is historic. The number of people locally, nationwide, who have come out during a pandemic to cast their vote, it just gives my heart joy. People waited in line. I know some of you guys probably seen the picture in Birmingham that it was storming, it was raining, and people just stood there waiting for their turn to vote. And I'm just overwhelmed with the number of young African Americans who registered for the first time, who voted, who was excited. It seemed like it was more joy. We went from the summer of angst and protests, yes, and concern. And I have to give it to these young people. They turned it around and they said, yes, I'm going to turn my power into a vote. And that's all I can ask for. I'm just so pleased.
Exactly. And I mean, if you think about it, we get in line for other things. We would go in line for shoes. I remember when I lived in Boston, I stood in line in the rain for 2 hours to see Kendrick Lamar in concert in Rhode Island. So if I can do that, I can get out there and stand in line for 2 hours in the rain, whatever the case may be, for my vote to count. We do it for other things, so why
Absolutely.
not our lives? Our lives depended on this vote.
Absolutely. And that's a good little marketing strategy there in terms of kind of reminding people some of the sacrifices we make for the things that we want. And, perhaps, we can start to kind of redirect it. And I'm a part of the Democratic Party for Hinds County and the State Executive Committee for the Democratic Party. And we are certainly in search of and working to grow the party. And it's just critical. We talk about where are our alliances, because we know that when we're in a state of basically 40% of the population, you can't win an election without some alliances, some help. So
absolutely.
What's you all's thoughts about where we should be looking as a party and as a people to kind of grow our diversity and being able to get some support from some areas and some people that we may not normally look at?
Well, I think we first have to deal with voter apathy, the people who are not voting no matter what. And I think this national election, the presidential election, is showing us just how much one vote counts.
Absolutely.
We are counting pennies at this point. Mm-hmm. And it is stunning at the national level, where millions of votes are counted, that this election may be decided on less than 100,000 votes. That's stunning.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. And so that's almost half the population of Jackson, to put it in pure numbers. And so if we could get people to understand that their voice counts, their vote counts, that they should participate in the process. It may not be a perfect process. There aren't any perfect political parties, but we need you to get involved. And I think on the flip side, Attorney Quinn, Regina, that we have to on the elders. I'm gonna put myself with the elders. We have to be ready to accept the younger voices.
Absolutely.
And put them in leadership positions so they can feel like their voices are being heard. Give them a seat at the table, a meaningful seat, and let them speak, let them participate. Because pretty soon we are going to be passing a baton. So you might as well have them at the table now, and they could bring along their peers faster than we will ever be able to. That's why I think Stacey Abrams was so successful in Georgia. And then I think we have to kind of figure out some things. You know, campaigning of the past is not going to hit it. We're still trying to campaign the way we were campaigning. 60s, the 80s, the 90s. You know, President Obama gave us a new twist with the social media. So we figured it out. Trump has given us a whole nother twist that they didn't even see him coming. So everybody is saying now that the polls evidently are not working. Well, we know that African Americans, and I would say lower income ethnic groups as well as whites, really don't poll well. And then you have younger people who are on cell phones, so they're not picking up a house phone as in the past. Because everyone keep on asking, who are they polling? Who are they calling?
Absolutely. Well, let me mention one thing, Kimberly, to that point. You touched on a few things. I'm going to try to remember what I wanted to comment on, but it is in particular, the polling. I would suspect that some of the people who have been polled have not been totally honest about who they're going to vote for. I think Donald Trump, because he's a polarizing figure. Okay, so it may just be that when some people are asked, well, who are you going to vote for? People, in essence, may like to think that, well, Joe Biden is kind of he's a middle of the road type guy. He'll do what needs to be done. But he's not a divisive type of figure. That's who they want to have. That's their image of who they think that people see them as being attracted to. But I think many Americans look at Donald Trump and say, well, he has some antics that we don't particularly like. But some of the things that he's saying because he's protecting us is the whole issue of the browning of America and all those things that people are fearful as to where their stations may be in life. And therefore, they may be okay with some of his policies that may not necessarily be for all of the people, but just for a portion of the folks that are comfortable and very pleased with their station in life. So we've got to be really, intentional about what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And then that kind of a good segue, I guess, to the thing that you mentioned about letting the younger people take more of an active role in what it is that we're doing. Because when the Black Lives Matter folks came out and they marched in downtown Jackson with these, in dealing with the state flag, I saw a rainbow coalition, so to speak. So the younger folks that we have are I think at a point that they're saying, look, we're not down with this old image of Mississippi. We want a new Mississippi. We want a new flag. We want to be able to work together. We want to progress. We want to get from being, all these indicators of quality of life from. And, I've always said, the education, we're increasing our educational level, but the economics of the state still being 50th, and then healthcare. So all those things, if we want to be better, we've just got to do better and have better policies in place.
Well, Attorney Quinn, you see that we have another participant.
Oh,
our professional strategist.
And that's what we need. Let me turn.
Well, hi
there. I can't see everybody on this.
Okay,
very good.
Yes.
Hey.
I apologize. I was having some technical difficulties.
Hey,
so I was listening to you all on Facebook.
All right.
And then so I was able to join in, and So I want to say a couple of things, right? One of my big takeaways from this election, both in the state and nationally, as it relates to African Americans, is that we recognize when there's trouble and we know when to show up.
There you go.
You go. I am so proud of us, right? So
Absolutely.
Many of us are watching what's going on and watching what's happening in Georgia and in North Carolina and Arizona and Nevada and Pennsylvania. And if you go and look at what happened, the numbers that brought him in Michigan and Wisconsin, it was us.
Yes.
It was a couple of things that we did, right? It was that we recognized that this pandemic is serious and we were dying from it. And so we said, okay, we're going to go vote early. We're going to mail in because, this is important enough for me to figure out how not to place my life at risk, which is smart, right? Because all we got to do is wait a couple of weeks and we're going to see how this pandemic continues to rise. We act like it doesn't exist. And it does, right? So I am absolutely thrilled at how we have turned up, right?
Absolutely.
We've done that thing across the ages, across the generations. So, you got 100-year-olds and 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds. The faith community was saying, we can't do the souls to the pole the way we used to, but we're going to do something else. And we're going to get people there. The sororities and the fraternities strolled into the polls. HBCUs showed up. So, we did that thing.
That's right.
The numbers in Mississippi and in Hinds County, the turnout was higher than it's ever been and across the country, right? Yeah. So we forget that Donald Trump became president. He had almost 3 million fewer votes than Hillary Clinton. 3 states, less than 75,000 votes.
Wow.
We forgot that 4 years ago, right?
Wow.
And so the other thing that has happened this year is, so they're saying, we had record-breaking turnout both in our community and in the other community.
Sure.
And we had, and that Biden has gotten more votes than anybody.
Anybody.
Right?
Amazing.
So the thing we need to be
in the middle of a pandemic.
Right, in the middle of a pandemic, right? The thing we need to be challenging is this thing called the Electoral College. Because if there were no Electoral College, we wouldn't be wondering who's going to be the president.
Yeah.
Right?
We would not.
And everything else, the popular vote matters. If you go back and look at the history of the Electoral College, it was designed the way Mississippi's Electoral College was that we just got rid of, right? It was designed to suppress and eliminate the possibility of African Americans to be elected statewide in Mississippi and nationally. So we need to get rid of the Electoral College and let the popular vote matter. If that were the case, Biden is 3 million votes ahead.
Hey, if that were the case,
but why do we have
president?
We'd be celebrating, and we would have delivered.
But why do we have amnesia? This is the same conversation we had when Hillary lost.
Absolutely, and the conversation,
and we didn't do anything about it
because there hasn't been a president, a Republican president, who won both the Electoral College and the popular vote in the last 30 years. Last 20 years, right? Mm-hmm. So it is not in their best interest and they have been in control. It is not in their best interest to get rid of it, right?
Right.
Well, the other thing that has been happening in the last 20 years is we've been paying attention to the presidency and the federal, they've been paying attention to the states. And so in state legislatures, and governor's office, the Republicans have been in control. And if you look at what's been going on in this country since Nixon, so we're talking about 1969, right? Mm-hmm. It has been things to suppress and dismiss the value of African Americans and African American vote. This has not just started happening.
That's right.
That's right.
We have to be more vigilant as we move forward in what it is we demand and what we want to do, right? And so I think it's time for community to come together. We got the elders who got time on their hands. We got the young people who got energy, right? I have a whole lot of peers who are still I think we're still in the prime of our lives.
Yeah, you better believe it.
But they didn't retire, right? I'm just looking at my line sisters and my sorority sisters across the country. They retired. They ain't got to worry about no jobs. They got time. They got energy. They got intellect, and they're willing to build community. So we got to begin to figure out how to work all of that together. Yes. This is the first time we've had this all happening for us, right? Mm-hmm. So this is opportunities for us to say, okay, there's some things that are going well, but there's room for improvement. Let's figure out what the improvement is and make this happen. And we really got to do that in Mississippi, right? I came in and we were talking about just the significant numbers of African Americans who reside in this state. I look at it and I have been stretched out of my bed thinking about if you go from North Carolina all the way around, we're double digits, and you look at the map and the map is red and something wrong with that picture.
Right.
Right. So we got to have some real conversations about what are the things we can do to win, who do we need to have as an ally, and who we need to leave alone.
Yeah.
Everybody can't go with us.
No doubt.
I mean, that's kind of hard, right? But that's real.
It's just the reality of life. You're talking about the black belt, and you're absolutely right. We've got the numbers, so we just need the strategy, and we know we have the will to do it. So let's get it done. The coalitions are critical.
We can't. We gotta look at. We gotta figure out who our allies are, right? Yes. We gotta be willing to be bold in our conversation. But equally important is we have to be willing to learn from one another. You each have skills, intellect, ability. None of us have the answer. But if we sit around the table, put what we know on the table, and listen and learn, we can come up with the answer. I believe that, right?
Oh,
but how do you get us all in the room, leave the egos at the door? I mean, because the difference, the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans is we are a big tent. Somebody came into a room and said, "You got to do just what I say." You're gonna say, "I ain't gonna do that just because you told me to do it," right? Right. So we gotta sometimes say, "Let me just listen and learn," and be willing to acknowledge when we have made a mistake. That some things that we've done hasn't worked and it hasn't been right. And sometimes the agendas were not our agendas, but we took them.
Surely.
That was the thing to do.
Yeah.
No doubt. We definitely have to learn how to play team sports, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Things may not always go the way you want, but don't just pick up your ball and go home. And that's one thing you really have to look at the Republican Party and see what they do well. They may not all like each other, but they've learned how to get on the same sheet of music together and sing that same song and then work their plan and their agenda. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, we kind of get stuck on what Dr. Corinne Anderson likes to say, we get hooked on pot positions, offices, and titles. And we can't seem to just, work for the good of the order and get the self out of the way. And decide what it is that is necessary in order to accomplish the goal. And that's what's critical for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We seem much more reactionary and they strategize more.
Yeah.
But we don't know that, right? We don't know what they do because we're not in the rooms with them. That's the difference, right? we don't know what they do. They could be fighting in the room. We don't know that, right?
I'm sure they are. The
issue is when you come out. When you come out of the room, whatever that went on in the room, leave it in the room, come out of the room and say, okay, this is the plan and work it.
That's right.
I often say that I'm a science fiction person. I love Star Trek: The Next Generation. I love Jean-Luc Picard, right? Jean-Luc Picard surrounded himself in his ready room with people who had skills different from his. You had Worf, the warrior, Data, the empath. You had all of these different people, and they would look at the same problem, but view it from their lens.
Yeah,
they would articulate what it was from their lens, and he would hear them, and then he'd say the direction and say, "Make it so." Right? Wow. Didn't have to agree, but when they left out of the ready room, they made it so. That's where we have to be. We don't, I have had some people that I loved a whole lot. We ain't agree on. That's neither here nor there. When you walk out the room, you're supposed to say, this is the plan and let's work the plan.
Yeah.
So we don't know what they do, right? So I don't give them that they have any more there's some humanoid that don't have the kind of same craziness we do. Because when you talk to people as a friend, right, you learn they got more pathology than we got. We just don't know about their pathology, right?
Yes.
I'm always reminded when people talk about welfare, if you look at places where it's more of them on welfare than us, but that ain't what we think. Right? It's more of them got, so I'm not going to give them that they ain't got the pathology of being human. It's about, can you move beyond that?
Sure. And when you talk about welfare, oftentimes we look at, small money, but it's been a lot of welfare in terms of corporations and corporate greed and malfeasance. And, we see what's going on with a lot of the fraud and the indictments going on.
Absolutely.
So, anytime you have a state where the poorest state in the union, the poorest state, where $90 million is that should have been going to people that have needs, but going to people for houses and trips but when people start to criticize the system, they can know about that corporate greed. But the thing they seem to focus on is someone that might have been getting $50 more than they should have.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And it's just insane. What are we doing? What are we doing? Right.
During the pandemic and people were getting the unemployment, right? The extra federal unemployment, and they were getting the extra $600 a week. I heard from some folk, they're making more money than they were when they were working with this federal unemployment pandemic money, and they don't want to go back to work. And I was like, okay, so like $600 a week ain't but $15 an hour. Right? So you were paying them not a living wage, and you saying to them, okay, I want you to place your life at risk to come be dealing with the public and not make that. And you say, people be like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah. and try to figure out what to do with your children, because that was a lot of the issue. Yeah. And it was all based on, kind of anecdotal stuff and the kind of the way we have begun to, over the last, 40, 50 years, penalize poverty, right? So anybody's poor, something wrong with them. No, it's something wrong with the system.
Oh, there's no doubt.
But that ain't, we penalize. They don't want to work. Dude, come on, right? I mean, it's just, and that's what I think the vote that we had, the people who showed up in the communities that they showed up, we now can say for sure to this new administration, some of this you ain't got but 4 years, right? Because we're not talking about no long-term stuff, right? We're talking about these are the things you need to do for our community in the next 4 years. We delivered you the presidency.
Oh my gosh. We talk about the Black agenda, the so-called Black agenda. I am so disturbed that normally they deal with two issues: criminal justice system, or prison reform, and substandard housing. Agenda is so much. I can't even say they dealt with substandard housing. I don't know if HUD did anything this past 4 years.
So you can't use this 4 years because wasn't no Black agenda this past 4 years.
No.
Don't get it. They had no Black agenda.
So what were people listening to when they said President Trump said he did more for the Black community?
When did you know him to tell the truth? He just said it, and people believed it. Who wanted to believe it, right?
But why didn't news reporters check him on that?
Look at the Washington Post. They talked about how many times that man lied. What are the things that
20,000?
Huh?
More than 20,000 lies.
Yes.
20. Wow.
So one of the real tragedies for me of his presidency is that we now have historically leadership all up and down meant you came with a certain kind of temperament, air, intellect, There were things, it's not that you didn't put spin on it, right? And everybody did a little bit of line, but you ain't never had nobody to just kind of he has just reset it. And I'm afraid that it's become the norm.
Mm-hmm. Right? Because he said he would drain the swamp, and that's what kind of people look at on his side, is that, oh, what he's doing is draining the swamp. We don't want politicians that are going to be the norm.
Right.
Right. We don't want politicians that are actually going to do what they say. And I think they just wanted something that was drastically different than what we got with Obama. You know, that they were so upset over him winning the presidency in 2008 and then the re-election in 2012, that they were trying to do everything they could to be nothing like Obama. And go ahead.
You know, I agree with you. I think that's clearly what this man who's on his way out, that was his temperament, right? And I think the thing the election show really that is the thing is the number of people that we know, we work with, we see every day who embrace what he stood for. Because that's what the election was, right? The election was it was in contrast. Do you want someone who, you know, is a healer, who brings people together, or do you want someone who's divisive? And at the core of what he was and is, his policies was racism. Do you want that? And I think the big fear is every day when we move about, we're dealing with people who desperately knows.
And that's what's so sad, because the 40%, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dan.
They're still choosing it. Even this election, white women still voted wholeheartedly for Trump. I can't logically come to any conclusion where that would make sense. But they did. Overwhelmingly, they still voted for Trump. White women, black women, and still, for the most part, black men are really holding together the Democratic Party in a lot of ways. And black women especially are dedicated and have always voted this way across the board. We see now black men more than ever are kind of going across the aisle. And I don't know if that's disillusionment. I don't know if they feel like they will get more on the Republican side. I have to do more research and just find out more about that. But it is alarming that a lot of black men are now standing for Trump and all that he stands for.
That's an interesting question that I think we need to delve into. And I would tell you that some of the African-American men that I have spoken to seem to get the sense that, okay, we know that black women are promoted and are being pushed politically and socially and economically. But there seems to be a feeling on this by a lot of black men that they are not the focus of these administrations, even Democratic Party administrations. And I would tell you,
Obama had the Black Male Initiative. I can't remember the name of it. And not no black girl. So, you know, I don't have first of all, I think we need to be very careful when we use terms that denote numbers, right? Because it's only a handful, I think, right?
What percentage?
That's what I was saying. I would love to see the numbers.
I know it grew. It grew from.
I can tell you now the numbers that just voted for Kanye are enough.
Yeah,
but you know, so there is
Regina said that's a different group.
There is this sense there. I had a really fascinating text conversation with my 18-year-old nephew. Okay. I wanted to have a conversation about why were influencers and including Ice Cube supporting Trump, right? And I could not engage him in the conversation. I just sent him some articles because I really wasn't paying attention to them because they're not my influencers. but they are influences for a generation of folk.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think that one of the things that's the disconnect, it's like, because there's so much media, there's so many places where people can get information, there's so many people who's saying stuff, it's hard to find out who the experts are. Because everybody's opinion is their opinion, but that doesn't make it an expert, right? And one of the things social media has done, and the internet and Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook and, Twitter, people have followings, people say stuff, and, and a lot of it really is fake news.
Mm-hmm.
But if you say it enough, it takes on a life of its own. And so those of us who know better need to do better. We got to be more careful about it, right? I am not in any way trying to say that that we don't need to make sure we do everything to make everybody feel inclusive, because that's, I think, the strength of the Democratic Party.
Absolutely.
Is making people feel inclusive, right? I know that when I heard about My Brother's Keeper, that's what it was called, My Brother's Keeper, and they were doing the work with the young boys, my reaction kind of quietly was, it's a whole lot of young sisters that struggle, right? Mm-hmm. But, you pick your battles, right? I don't need them to do that with the sisters. It's on me to do it with the sisters, right? And so we have to be very, very careful about that. So again, back to my great nephew, what I've found in myself is sending him articles to read from other people who knew stuff about it that I didn't, who may have been a little bit older, to give him a different kind of insight.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's critical. And to your point, and to other comments, is that we certainly need to explore it a little bit and make sure that we bring everyone who's interested in being a part of underneath the tent and a part of the family. We need everyone in the family.
Absolutely.
And that's how we are more whole. So that would be a great and interesting conversation to have. I will ask you to do something that someone asked me to do, and I thought it was interesting, and that is start to pay a little bit more attention to how Black men are portrayed in commercials and in television programs. I'm not gonna just take note of it, and then let's come back together and see what it is that you all see, and we'll have a discussion about it. But I think when I was like, that's kind of interesting. So we have some work to do. We have some work to do.
Absolutely. What was interesting to me, I don't want to get too much off the subject, but it has a little bit to do with your assignment. During the pandemic, it was my first time streaming Netflix. And so, I found myself trying to find African-American stories or, movies, something light, that, not too, and everything that was African-American focused or Black focused was, someone strung out on drugs or crime written or gang written or, and I'm like,
we're going backwards.
Who's writing these stories?
Exactly.
What? And I said, where are my peers? Reflected and represented. And it was so bizarre. And I mean, almost like you're saying with the commercial, if you look at the images, and I said, well, I see why some people who may not have much exposure to the Black community think ABCD, if this is all that they're seeing. Yeah. I'm sure they could think a little bit deeper, but I was just shocked. I was really shocked.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's where it starts. Interestingly enough, when Black people, and not just Black people, but when people hit the streets, Black Lives Matters and others, and protest, you would often hear people in the other communities saying, well, I was okay with Black Lives Matter until the violence started. And they consider violence to be looting, hitting a building, breaking in a car, whatever. that's, that may be disruptive behavior, but violence is when you're being violent towards a human being. So, but it is just interesting how, the whole discussion about what they see and what reality is, it's given a whole lot more of a more violent kind of description about what's going on. But, the reality also is what we've seen and what Black people have lived through with George Floyd and with Breonna Taylor and these others who have suffered. We want to see people in the other community speak to that more than 15 minutes.
Absolutely.
Okay, live with it, deal with it, and feel our pain.
Yeah.
And that's if we're interested in having a wholesome community where we can all, be a part of this great experiment that we're supposed to be a part of, then you've got to be interested in what we're going through, not just how you view what we are going through and then get bored with it and then turn the page and move on to something else.
So a few years ago, there was a TV show that was only on for a season or two. It was on one of them. It wasn't on like Netflix or anything. It was like CBS, ABC, one of those, I think. But it was about a community in rural Kentucky.
Okay.
That was outside of some city, but it was up in the mountains and it was isolated and people had lived there for generations and they were white and poor.
Okay.
Wasn't on but for a minute, right? I think the reality is we don't know enough about each other's communities.
Absolutely.
And so the thing that we assume is what we see on television. So there's a whole generation of people who think Black folk are they were either Good Times or the Cosbys. Well, those are extremes.
Yes,
community, right? There are lots of folk in between. But I think that's what television does, right?
Yes.
I like the people up in Kentucky because it's like, oh, folk live like that. I suspected it, but I don't know, right? I know the Amish community, they're isolated.
Right.
You just don't think that there are other people who do that. So I get the importance of that. What's more important to me is how we as a community see ourselves and talk about ourselves, right? Yes. That is for me the great challenge, and it's often in my value system, sometimes we fail in that in terms of the judgments we make,
yes, and
the language we use to describe the behaviors of folk who we encounter. Because that when some young sisters see me, some young sisters see y'all, they looking for who they can become. Mm-hmm. And when we see them, we should see who we were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Nice to
running out of time, but I just like to make a couple points. One, I think, to your point, is I wish, when Mike Espy did not win in 2018, we immediately kind of saw that he was going to run in 2020. I wish that the time in between 2018 and when he really started campaigning was used for education within certain pockets of communities. I think campaigning can be used in different ways, and I think a lot of it actually should be used for education and communing with one another. I think that's a big part of campaigning that sometimes we just don't get. And I know we couldn't do a lot because of the coronavirus this year, but if that would have started in 2018 on through 2019, we may have been seeing a different result. And I think that's what we should start doing now in 2020 in any way that we can, to be safe. Is there are going to be some seats that are up in 2 years.
Absolutely.
We need to make sure that we're at least keeping a majority in the House, because we lost seats in the House this year. in this election. So we need to be communing with people. We need to educate people about what the political process is. Not just the people that are going to always show up. We have to go to places where the people don't know what's going on.
Absolutely.
And educate people on where they are. The second thing is that, we haven't really touched on the Supreme Court race with Latrice Westbrooks. I was really kind of disappointed about that one. We could have been in so many ways this time. And though we got rid of a flag that really needed to go, we still could have made momentous steps this year that we just didn't. And even looking, I don't know if people just didn't know enough about this race, but even looking at the ballots in Hinds County, she got 4,000 votes less than Biden. So people were not, they weren't going down the line Democratic. Yes. They weren't going down the line Republican. Some people voted more for Biden. Some people voted more for Mike Espy. And they just didn't show the same results for her. And I was really disappointed with that. Also, the third thing is that our whole election commission is going to be different. The makeup of our entire Hinds County Election Commission is different. And what does that mean for Hinds County? That we have two people who are staying, Tony Johnson in District 2 and Yvonne Horton in District 4. But District 1 is different. District 5 is different. And there still has to be another election since Mr. Wayne McDaniel passed away. So what does that whole new makeup of our election commission mean for Hinds County as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I am so glad you mentioned those. I would tell you it was such a shock to me for Latrice Westbrooks not to win that race. When I looked at the counties and the majority count, African American counties that made up the district, I said, look, this is doable. This is beyond doable. But to your point, I'm not sure what happened there. And I'm just curious about those 4,000 votes that did not go to her because she had the commercials out, the signs were out. She ran a great campaign. So not sure. And she went out and she spoke and she just did what she needed to do. So we're missing it somewhere. I'm just not sure where. We've got to figure that one out.
What was the gap? What was the percentage breakout for that race? Do we know it?
It was like 55 to 44.
Has it been certified? I thought there was still enough absentee ballots out that it hadn't been certified yet.
It said it was like 97, 98% reporting the last time I saw.
Okay, I don't know. So I think I think you're right. There's the profound disappointment in Judge Westbrook's race for a whole bunch of us. Profound disappointment. But I also am reminded that's also the Central PSC that we lost last year.
Yes, that's right. Exactly right.
It's the same counties,
right?
Same counties, right? Same counties. So we have to look at, right now what is in that district that's kind of majority African American in terms of the makeup or the BVAP. We have the Central District Transportation Commissioner only. We don't have the Public Service Commissioner. We don't have the judicial race at the Supreme Court race. So I think that there's some soul searching in our community that has to happen about that, right?
And the work starts now. It starts.
All of the work starts now. Absolutely, 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 absolutely. Now, again, as it relates to the Biden and Mike Espy, I think Black folks showed up. I think the mistake we made was we thought white people were going to vote differently, and they didn't.
Yeah, they showed up.
They showed up.
I think if you, I ain't know no other way to say that, right?
Well, look, when he would have his rallies, they were brave the pandemic. They were brave weather. They come out. So when he says come out, they come out. So we now we know. Now we know. But
I mean, to me the lesson in this race, both at the federal, at the national level, and at state Senate race, was there are people who are attracted to what Trump is, and from my vantage point, the people who voted for Cindy Hyde-Smith because she was so closely aligned to Trump, right? They voted for that, not for Mike. That wasn't on us. That wasn't on us.
Right.
Well, ladies, it's that time, I believe.
Oh, that went by so fast.
We're going to have to have part 2.
You know, people want to know how Hitler came into power, and now we know. We really do.
We do.
There's no wondering anymore how history repeats itself. Mm-hmm. You know, we're in the midst of it now. We've made our decision. We've cast our vote, and we hope that, you know, we have enough votes to turn the tide to preserve our democracy. That is where we are now.
Yes. And you can't do it without a fight, and you got to be prepared to fight.
That's it.
And now it's our time to plan, strategize, and then the next election act.
Very good, Kimberly. Well said. And ladies, thank you for joining us. And to our listening audience, thank you all so much for tuning in and joining Women for Progress. And if you want to email us, please do so at mail@womenforprogress.net. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think. And if you'd like to be on the show, please reach out. Thank you and have a great evening. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, ladies.
Bye-bye.
Bye.